Postnatal depletion. If you had a kid or three, you know what it is. You know it in a way that words cannot describe and are not necessary. Yet, chances are your GP doesn't really know about it. Chances are your naturopath and your herbalist don't really know about it either. When I was sitting in on Western herbal med courses and naturopathic iridology classes 25 years ago, it wasn't a thing. In Australia, it's been popularized by the work of Dr. Oscar Serelak, a local guy who lives down the road from here. And if you want to look more into this, you can look at his book, Postnatal Depletion, The Cure of Postnatal Depletion. But today, I'm going to go not into the science of it, but the energetics of it. By energetics, I mean the poetry of it. Because coiled inside the vital dynamics and the poetry of the vital dynamics is really the essence of what can help us as therapists be able to effectively support this archetypal and universal pitfall following childbirth. So I want to start off with a quote from Magamaya, my wife. And she said in Eastern Europe, they say, for every child you lose a tooth, right? For every child you lose a tooth. Now, that is obviously not always literally true, but it points beautifully to the vital dynamics underneath here, because teeth are seen as symbols of vitality. As you get old, you lose your teeth, right? And so the imagery around teeth is that they are like sort of mushrooming blossoms that come out of the sea of marrow within, right? And if that sea of marrow is full, if your vital reserves, those reservoirs of strength are full, then your teeth are good. But as that waxes and wanes, or you go through deep pressures, then the teeth lose their vitality. And so it's pointing in this folk wisdom to a decline of marrow, meaning a decline in the reservoir of blood and chi, a decline in the sea of chi, a decline in your vital reserves, right? So for every child you lose a tooth is pointing to the incredibly taxing nature of growing a human being inside your body, right? But it's not just a human being, right, that pregnancy grows. It's so much more than that. So let's have a look at some of the other things to remind ourselves of what grows through this process, and just how much vitality is required to undertake this incredible alchemical process, right? So the first one is you obviously grow a placenta as well in pregnancy, and the placenta is a palace of blood, right? It's, if you've seen placenta, it's like congealed blood. It's just so rich, and we know it's so rich. It's and it's big as well. It's like a half kilo. It's a solid thing, right? It's a mass like this. And we see in the natural world, there's a range of animals that will seek out the afterbirth and consume it, right? There's an instinctive knowledge that this is full of richness. And there's practices all over the world of women consuming it, a placental smoothie, or just paleo raw if they're like really gutsy, or if not, dehydrating it and encapsulating it. It's also used as a medicine in China and other parts of the world, where the placentas of women that didn't want their placentas are somehow turned into medicines. It's all a little bit weird. So personally, I don't prescribe other people's placentas. But the point is, a placenta is an organ that is incredibly rich, right? It's a concentration on vitality. Excuse me. It's the baby's twin in some way, right? And so you're growing a baby and you're growing a placenta. And it's really important to have that sense. Like, it's just so much. Like, if the amount of muscle that it would take to create the concentration of vitality in a placenta is kilos and kilos of muscle, right? It's dynamically and vitally so much richer than just steak, right? And so it's an incredible concentration of your vital reserves to create the placenta, right? Another one is the cord blood, right? And so coursing through the placenta is liquid placenta, right? Or the placenta is concentrated cord blood. The placenta as well could be thought of as an elixir of marrow, because we use, the cord blood could be thought of as an elixir of marrow in the dynamic, energetic sense of marrow as the reserves, right? As that deepest interiority inside the bones. This vital stuff that we know we need. When you need bone marrow transplants, then they give you cord blood, the stem cells from cord blood, to help regrow that bone marrow. So cord blood is precious from a modern perspective because it's so rich in stem cells, and stem cells are the undifferentiated cells, the archetypal cells, the cells that can become any cells. They can become liver cells and bone cells and brain cells and muscle cells and organ cells and any kind of cells. They're just stem cells that blossom forth and grow in this way. And so there's so much vitality in cord blood, right? And so there's, it's so vital that the amount that's in there is not that much. It's like, I think the average is about 75 mils when they're harvesting it. Again, my kids were born lotus. They got all of their stem cells and all of their cord blood, and their placentas came off in their own time, right? I'm not sure you need to do lotus births, but at least delayed cord clamping, so that all of that movement of cord blood still goes into your baby is a wonderful idea as an aside, right? So there's like 75, 80 mils of this really rich stuff, and it doesn't sound like very much, but it's so precious that it's harvested medically for medical research and for transplants, and it saves people's lives, following radiation therapy and bone marrow decline, right? That's how precious it is. And the mother has to produce it, right? She's got to produce all of that stuff, and she does it at the expense of her own marrow. She draws upon her own marrow to produce this elixir of marrow, right? And so in drawing upon those reserves of marrow, then the fruiting bodies of marrow in the mouth, the teeth, the wisdom teeth and things, then they can decline and get empty and hollow and crack and fall out. Hence that Eastern European wisdom. So we've got the cord blood and we've got the placenta, right? Next along is the amniotic elixir, this amniotic ocean that is also grown, right? And so we tend to dismiss this. We just think of it as water, but it ain't. It's not just water. It is an incredibly precious alchemical elixir that the body of the mother produces and distills, and she distills it out of her blood. She distills it out of her marrow. She distills it out of her heart and her adrenals. It's packed with nutrients. It's filled with stem cells. It's packed with immunoglobulins and all these white blood cells and stuff, right? So it's an incredibly precious elixir as well. And it's much richer than just what you get when you get words when you put on a drip, right, in hospital. It's like if you could get put on a drip of amniotic fluid, it would be like, oh my God, you'd be recharged. I can imagine the sort of this vampiric, noble aristocratic classes that are like metaphorically or physically harvesting amniotic fluids, right? In the same way there's all that other sort of stuff, this weird icky stuff around birth with these things, right? The point is, it's rich. It's very, very rich, right? It's not just plasma. It's not just fluid. You can't just build it by drinking coconut water alone, right? It's refined blood, refined marrow. It has essence. It is its own soma. It has ojas. It's rich in jing, right? It's a colloidal suspension of ojas or jing, like essence, right? That's what is in the amniotic ocean there, this primordial ocean out of which life emerges. It's not just water. So when you say her waters are broken, we mean that with a capital W. The waters that God hovered above in Genesis. It's those waters that are broken, but it's not just water. We could also think of it as prenatal breast milk, right? Swimming in prenatal breast milk, or the extracellular fetal fluid. And if you've heard me speak previously about the extracellular matrix that surrounds every cell in the body and is the directive brain and nutrient mass of which cells are held and conveyed and moved through, this incredibly rich colloidal suspension that is throughout our whole body, right? That structured water. It's something like this, the extracellular fetal fluid, or the prenatal breast milk, right? It should be thought of alongside something like ovum and sperm and sexual juices, refined matter. And so I'm here drawing upon in a way, the theory of the development of dhatus in Ayurveda, the tissues, right? And so when you eat food, then if you eat a lettuce leaf, then after it goes through the digestive process, it goes through there, then most of that lettuce leaf then goes in and flows into this first dhatu or tissue, which is something like plasma, rasa, sap, right? And then the little bits that's left, because the lettuce is not very nutritionally dense, flows in and forms a little bit of blood. Now, that's probably where the lettuce leaf ends. If, however, you eat something really hearty and you have this incredibly rich, hearty stew that's cooked with all the good things, right? And it's got good fat and good protein and good herbs and good vegetables and all this sort of stuff, then the flow of creation of your tissue states goes into the sap, the plasma, and then a portion of that, a smaller portion, goes in and creates blood. And then a smaller portion of that goes in and creates muscle, or is refined, right? We could think of it like goes in and creates sap, and then is refined, and some of it flows out and nourishes blood, and then that blood is refined further, and some of that congeals out and makes muscle, and then that muscle is metaphorically and alchemically refined further and creates fat, and that fat is then alchemically concocted and refined further to make bone, and then each bit is smaller and smaller, and that bone is refined further to make marrow, and then that marrow is refined further to create these final little drops of reproductive essence of sperm and ovum, right? And then that is further refined to create the teensiest little dew of essence, right? And it's that process of alchemical distillation that is required to produce these high elixirs that the maternal womb distills, right? The womb is a cauldron here, an alchemical alembic, this vessel for cooking and distilling. The whole body is an alchemical laboratory. It must go through the kidneys and the liver and through the bone marrow and all through those tissues to be able to produce these incredible elixirs, like the amniotic elixir, right? So we've got that. And then out of that, then the maternal laboratory, the alchemical process of child gestation, also has to produce a baby. And that baby has all of those tissues. That baby has bones and bone marrow. That baby has fat and protein. That baby has nerves. That baby has gonads. That baby has like the vitality in the gonads and the beginning of like ovum and sperm. Like it's all of that has to be made on top of the rest of what I said, right? And so although gestation is an entirely natural process, it should not be medicalized and pathologized and put into an institutionalized environment like childbirth is done. It's natural. It's the most natural thing in the world. The mother's body knows what to do. It is still very taxing. It takes a lot of chi, right? And if you've got a lot of chi, then that's good. It's okay. But if you're living in the 21st century, chances are you don't, because you're descended from people that went through wars and famines and traumas and agricultural revolutions, and your ancestors were only 4'11" because they were nutritionally stunted. You go back further, your ancestors were 6 foot tall in the Paleolithic era. The ancestors all through the Middle Ages that were so little with those little doors, that's because they were stunted. They were nutritionally stunted. They were eating nothing but bread or potatoes. That's your genetic ancestry. So you don't have, you don't have as much vitality. None of us do in this regard. And so this knowledge of how to preserve and honor and vitalize that is very necessary, especially when going through something like childbirth. So then the next fluid that I want to discuss in terms of this is after giving birth, right? And the process of birth, the energy required that's there in those contractions, right? And so it's a marathon, but it's more than just a marathon. It's more than, if your birth takes 18 hours, it's more than an 18-hour workout in the gym. There's something vital that's happening. It's still alchemically cooking. We want to see it electrodynamically. Not just muscles contracting. We want to see it like the way the heart, the helical heart, vitalizes the blood through electromagnetic fields. There's the generation of electromagnetic fields is taking place in the uterus like this. So the broadcasting, the amplification, the generation of that energy is not just muscles contracting. Muscles contracting for 18 hours or 10 hours or 24 hours or 36 hours is exhausting enough, but it's more than that. So childbirth has this expenditure of chi as well, right? But then, and the loss of those fluids and all this sort of stuff, right? But then after that, the next thing that happens is breastfeeding. And so breast milk is another one of these alchemical elixirs. It is distilled or refined. It's the cream of blood. There's the blood, and then it's the cream, like the white blood cells. There's whiteness inside. There's refined essence inside blood. And to produce breast milk is to take the best of all of the things, right? And the mother's body will give preference to the baby. It will draw upon her marrow, it will draw upon her fat reserves, it'll draw upon her energy, it'll draw upon her chi, it'll draw upon her stored nutrient bases. All of this to be able to produce this exquisite, there's no formulas that I've got that compare to breast milk. Nobody does. Breast milk, it's an elixir of immortality. It's incredible. Just look at the properties of breast milk and see all of that, the immunoglobulins and the rich nutrient density of it, and the way in which it's guiding and nourishing still. It's doing all of the same things as the extracellular fetal fluid matrix, right? It's not just a nutrient. It is an intelligent medicine that's drawing upon the vital force. It is a distillation of the mother's vital force, right? It's her vital force, the intelligence of her body, taken into liquid, in the same way that your deep joy is distilled into this drop of serotonin, right? It's a concretization. It's a materialization of these processes, right? And so breastfeeding is what happens after you've just grown all of this stuff, lost a whole bunch of this stuff, had it exit your body in a marathon of a philharmonic orchestra of energetic amplification and all that is happening inside there, the signaling that takes place through that. Then the first thing that the mother does is then effectively cut her vein open and then bleed into her baby. And she does that through breastfeeding, right? She does it through breastfeeding. Or she puts why can I not think, a drip into her bone marrow. And she hooks up that drip, not into her blood as a blood transfusion, but into her bones, into its essence in there. And then transmits that to the baby immediately after finishing that whole process. And then she does it multiple times a day and night for months and months and months. 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, right? Yes. It's against this backdrop that you need to consider postnatal depletion, right? It's against this backdrop that you need to consider that aphorism from the Eastern European witches like Magamaya, that for every child you lose a tooth, a mythopoetic tooth, right? A reserve of deep vitality and essence. Well, having said all that, it sounds like a medical emergency, which it's not. But we need to understand those processes so that we can better support women to maintain their vitality through this, which is very natural, right? So first off, I want to just speak of a couple of the amplifiers and risk factors for postnatal depletion, right? So breastfeeding is one. Tragically, oh so tragically, the longer you breastfeed, the more depleted that you can possibly be. Not necessarily, but we have to understand it's an ongoing tax on the vital reserves, and it's beautiful and sacred, and it should be undertaken, and babies need it, right? I'm not trying to steer women away from breastfeeding, and I want them to understand it in this sense of how precious that fluid is. What are some other amplifiers? A diet that is not up to task here, right? And what kind of diet is that? Well, the diet where I live, the predominant diet is something like a detox diet around here. It could be a vegan diet, and a particular kind of vegan diet. It could be a vegetarian diet. It could be a raw food diet. It could be a diet just that is kind of higher in carbs and lower in protein and lower in fat, right? All of these things are, when you think of that distillation of dhatus, right? The flow on of how much bone marrow can you make from a lettuce leaf? How much sperm and ovum can you make from a lettuce leaf? The answer is none. A lettuce leaf is pretty empty. How much do you make from a carrot? Not that much, especially our modern carrots. Our modern carrots are like this big and they're full of sugar and they're bright orange. Our ancient carrots were this big, like ancient as in 500 years ago. They were this big on the side of the road and they were bitter and they're full of chi, full of nutrients, right? Our peaches in 1950, if you had 2 peaches in 1950, it gave you enough vitamin A for your daily requirements. Government daily requirements, whatever those things mean. 2. In 2007 or something like this, you required 50 of those, right? And if you're living on this continent, in Australia, your organic food is grown in the oldest, most ancient soil on the planet, right? The first signs of life and the oldest rocks that we can find are here in Australia and somewhere in Greenland, I believe, right? Ancient, the smallest mountains, the flattest earth, and the most demineralized, right? And so our hybridized vegetables and fruits grown in this soil, even organically, are comparatively empty, right? So we need vital herbs that have not been mollycoddled like carrots and apples and peaches, right? And lettuce leaves, just to be big and beautiful and sweet and colourful. We need them full of chi. We need them to have fought for their life. We need them to have been out there in the Alps and in the desert and in the jungle and surrounded by things, to have to nestle out and put their taproots in and survive against stuff, so that vitality and that resilience is in them. It's in them, right? And so that's why herbs come in, because our fruits and vegetables, our blessed organic fruits and vegetables, are all very yin. They're very, very yin. And we need rich tonics, right? And so our diet is so often insufficient in terms of, and so a couple more risk factors. Sleep debt. You cannot distill the things you need to distill and perform the sacred alchemy of creating breast milk and extracting nutrients and vitality and chi out of your diet when you're in a constant state of fight, flight, and you're existing on 4 or 5 hours of sleep. And yet that is a very common experience, right? And so it's a risk factor. We need to understand that it's a risk factor for postnatal depletion, right? Understand it in this vital sense. Stress in general, right? You're a single mom, you're economically stressed, your partner is stressed, like you've got another kid before that you're trying to care for, and you don't live in a tribe and you don't have a community, and there's not uncles and aunties and grandmas all around cooking for you and helping out. If that's you, then you are in the 99.9% of people in the modern world. So you're stressed, right? All those things are risk factors. And so that's why postnatal depletion is so common, so incredibly common, because of those risk factors. So what do we do? The question is the first question is now, the next question is, what do we do? How do you buffer against it? How do you treat it? How do you support it? So there's a range of different things. The first one is perhaps really consider consuming your afterbirth, like having it dehydrated and having placental caps, right? Rather than planting it, under a tree or something. If you can get your head around it, it's the most powerful tonic, and you follow nature, right? So placental caps. I used to do it for my clients, but I don't do it for my clients anymore. But hopefully a midwife can. It's simple. You dehydrate it, grind it up, you encapsulate it, and then you just have them like this. If you can't do that, and that's not possible, then other supplements, the traditional Western supplement that takes place here is liver. Liver is the closest thing to placenta. It's similar, and it's called liver, life. It's called Leben, life. It has that name, life. That's what it is, and it's no accident. It's because it looks like afterbirth. It's congealed blood. It's similar energetics. Not the same, but similar to placenta. It's the closest thing that you can get. And so liver caps or liver meals, pâtés. I've had vegetarian women who have just, grudgingly come towards trying to not be vegetarian when their depletion was so great, and found that even something weird like pate, their mind recoiled and their body just went it was just like, give me the nutrients and the chi, the fat and the goodness. So take a non-vegetarian woman a whole bunch of pate or lamb's fry or something like this, or buy her organic grass-fed encapsulated liver, right? So this is a great one. Bone broths and marrow dishes, right? So bone broths, really easy. Everyone's on their bone broths today. Good, organic, wonderfully prepared bone broths, ethically harvested and all that sort of stuff. Marrow dishes, get the cut marrow bones, cook them up, have a scoop it out, or blend it through soups and stews, right? In Ayurveda, they would make things like this for basti, for colonic infusions. And so you get like this kind of richness, bypassing the digestive tract and going straight into the colon, right? Like bone marrow broth decoctions, cooked with herbs as well, and then just like, that was the drip. Before there was a drip, that was the drip. And it was put in like that. And so this is one. Another one is fat. Fat. It's concentrated. Not just carb. We don't want carbs entering back here on the stream. Fat is entering up here on the stream. It's distilled already, right? You think about ghee, and then you think about the way in which the grass photosynthesizes and captures chi, but then the cow consumes the grass, and then it refines down and it produces eventually the milk, and then the milk is alchemically refined further to create cream, and the cream is refined further to create butter, and the butter is refined further to make ghee. The amount of grass in that ghee, the amount of sunlight, the amount of chi in that ghee is why ghee is a central tonic in Ayurveda that's very, very relevant to postnatal depletion. And you can cook herbs in the ghee as well. Get as much ghee, get ghee on all the meals. However, the fat that makes most sense from a Western perspective is coconut oil. Why? Because scientifically speaking, coconuts are guys' boobs. And so there's this like, they're abundant, they're big, they're round, they're full of fluid, and they just keep giving and giving and giving and giving and giving. And coconut oil is full of medium chain triglycerides, and that's the oil, that's the fat in breast milk. And so that signature there of the Gaian boob juice and abundance of coconuts, right? As if you've been to Kerala in South India or other places in Southeast Asia where there are coconut cultures, it's like corn for the Americas or something. It's just like there's an abundance inside there. And so coconut oil. As much coconut oil as you can get without messing with your digestive system. What does that mean? 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 mils a day, right? That's not a teaspoon, right? 30 mils. That's 6 teaspoons as your starter. So 2 teaspoons on each meal. That's the entry level, right? If you can get more in without messing with your digestion, don't. If it messes with your digestion, it's pointless, it's poison, right? But as much as you can consume, so you build up. So we've got fats. We've got the sense of generally a hearty diet, not a detox diet, not a raw food diet, not a diet rich in cooling, draining, detoxifying juices and smoothies and things like this, and salads, but as concentrated as you can get. So if it's vegetarian, it's still soups and stews with layers, like a good veggie stock to the beginning, and then there's like shiitakes and beetroot cooked in there with a big chunk of astragalus, and you make this hearty meal. You also got goji berries in there, and that all dissolves inside there, and lots of seaweed, right? And then, like that's just your juicy sauce of all of that business, right? Like that's like a great broth, sauce, stew base for a vegan hearty meal, for example, right? So just eating lots of carrots, no. So a hearty diet. In terms of herbs, so we're looking for blood and chi tonics. We're looking for herbs that go straight in to nourishing ojas as quickly as possible. And so in Ayurveda, so there's some herbs that just like go straight towards reproductive fluids. So saffron is one of those. It's so little. It's so little saffron. It's so light. It's so small, and yet it moves the blood and does its other things along the way. But most of it flows into shukra. Most of it flows into sperm and ovum. Right? Like cool. So our tonic herbs go straight there where they are needed. Right? And our fats and our bloods and our organs, they start off further along on that process. They start here and there's more to overflow like that. So tonic herbs are really good. So I'm going to give you some of the formulas that I use in this. I have a formula which is my blood building formula, and it's called, wait for it, cord blood of the earth. And it is vegan, and it contains Romania and Dong Quai and peony and a range of different things, and it's to be cooked up in ideally like in a beetroot tea as well, and it's red, and it's like drinking cord blood, vegetarian, vegan, herbal cord blood. It's a blood tonic, and women often have that same. Menstruating women, men that are blood deficient, anyone that's blood deficient will often have this like this is kind of like, I need that. I needed that, and it goes in really deep. Other ones, Gaian bone broth, and so it's great. It's vegetarian and vegan. It's just herbs, but either it adds a whole nother layer. It's got astragalus and shiitake and gherkin and these other things inside it. It adds another layer to your bone broth and makes it even richer. Or if you're vegetarian, then it gives you it's vegetarian bone broth in that regard, and then you put in coconut oil or ghee and you get the fats, and it's just add it to hot water and drink it, right? And so these two formulas are quite central: blood and chi, blood and chi, blood and chi. Other ones that I would recommend here are moon mana. Moon mana, it tonifies the yin. It's had at night. It's got ashwagandha and lion's mane and pearl powder in it, and it helps you sleep. And you have it in milk, oat milk, soy milk, whatever the milk is, moo milk. Shaolin coffee instead of coffee, right? All those herbs, all those medicinal mushrooms, all those tonics, rhodiola and things like that. And don't want caffeine. You don't want caffeine. Resist it. You're fatigued. You're fatigued. You're fatigued. Caffeine is a credit card on your chi. So Shaolin coffee, yin mana, yang mana, and then the capsules that I use, Thunderbolt, which is built around organically, ethically, ahimsa, no kill deer antler, right? So that's one of the things, because it's marrow, and so the deers don't get killed, right? They get anesthetized in their happy forest where they are from, and they shed. The antlers come off and they grow them the next year, and they do it like that. It's like milking a cow. So if you're okay with that, then this is a profound tonic. There's a lot of icky deer antler on the market. Don't go near it. So Thunderbolt is my yang tonic for chi, and it's got blood stuff in it as well. Seven Treasures of the Earth is another profound tonic that I use here, and the elixir that I use is Immortal Roots. It builds like liquid adrenal chi. And so those are the kinds of formulas I use. If you want to see the ingredients in them, you've got the names. You just go to my website and look at the ingredients. Postnatal depletion.